All right. Well, I know other people will be joining, but let me be the first to say good morning. Welcome to the Literacy Matters Conference. We are so lucky today to have members of Amplify supporting our transformation in literacy in our district. They have been wonderful partners with us throughout the past 2 years as we really change what we're doing in the classroom and on our campuses and implement a science of teaching reading curriculum. So we are blessed today to have Lucy Kesey and Andrew Benesh on the call today. Lucy has about 15 years of teaching experience across 4 states. And she loves to use her experience and the knowledge of CKLA, which is science of reading based. And then outside of work, she lives in Pittsburgh, which we were just discussing is a lot colder than we are currently in Texas, and just loves to spend time with her family. So Lucy and Andrew, thank you so much for being here. I know that as we go through our session today, if you have questions, post them in the chat box and Andrew's going to support us there. So welcome and thank you for supporting us. Over to you, Lucy.
Thank you, Amanda. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Why don't you just take a quick second and just say hello in the chat box and just let us know where you're joining from today. This is really, really exciting to be a part of this. I was a part of this conference last year and just loved it and so happy to be back. I always love to see where everyone is at and coming from. So as Amanda said, I'm in Pittsburgh, so super chilly here, normal winter. Woke up to a sunny 14 degrees, but hey, there's sunshine, so we will take that here. And if I mess up the time zone math, please feel free to call me out on that. Seeing some messages coming in. That's awesome. Good morning, everyone.
And if you've ever been with on a call with Amplify before, they are huge supporters. So really use the chat box to ask questions and engage through that because our learning, we know our learning is best when as soon as we have a stumbling block, we get that addressed, right? So please use the chat box. And I think people will continue to join, but go ahead and you can go ahead and get started.
Fantastic. Yeah, I am really grateful because Amanda's here from Aldine to help out, and also Andrew is here as well from Amplify to kind of.
This is Amplify. It's literacy.
All right. Yes, thank you everyone for staying on mute. With so many people on the call and kind of joining it at different times, it really does help. So thank you for that. But as I was saying, Andrew is here and he's going to kind of monitor the chat box as well to kind of address any Amplify questions throughout the session that he can. And then there will be some time at the end of the session for Q&A. Amanda did a great job introducing myself earlier today or earlier this morning, but I am a professional learning specialist for CKLA and Amplify Reading. I'm currently living in Pittsburgh. I have about 15 years of experience teaching, and my little fun fact is we moved around quite a bit. So at one point I had 4 different state licenses: North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania. So yep, a lot of state departments got my time and money for all those licenses, but all wonderful experiences. And like Amanda said, I really love using my teaching experience along with my knowledge of CKLA/science of reading to help teachers in this process. So I absolutely love my position here. So our agenda for this morning is, you see here. So what we're going to do is we're going to discuss just keys to effective lesson delivery and pacing, which we know with CKLA when you're starting out can be, quite a change. So we'll discuss that. I'm going to go through and model a portion of a knowledge lesson and a portion of a skills lesson. So you will see me do kind of like a plan aloud. So you kind of watch me go through a planning process, and then I will do a little bit of teaching. You all can be the students. You're welcome to chime in if you'd like to just kind of sit there as well and kind of, visualize yourself doing that, whatever works for you. And then we'll have some time to just reflect on each component. And then again, that time for Q&A at the end. So let's start off with just those, thinking about that effective lesson delivery. And that's going to start first and foremost with the primary focus objectives. And if you see here on the screen, you see the lesson overview where it says, lesson 7. This is just an example of the lesson overview that lays out your primary focus objectives for the lesson. We all know that when we teach reading, it's difficult. You teach so many standards and so many objectives at one time. So to kind of help with your pacing, it's best to keep these primary focus objectives listed here as really your main goals for that lesson. That will help with your pacing. The next thing, materials. On the screen here, you see an example of our lesson at a glance document. That's kind of the bottom right there. This comes right after that lesson overview. It's one of my favorite parts of the teacher guide. It breaks up the lesson by components, and then you can see it's going to give you different groupings, suggested timings. And if you look at that right hand, the last column there, it's going to tell you the materials needed for that lesson. I think of this as kind of like a checklist as you're prepping for that lesson, maybe the next day, just making sure you have everything that you need. Pacing and timing, you'll see me talk about this a little bit as I'm going through that plan aloud, but it is difficult. And I do a lot of coaching with schools, and some of my most experienced teachers have said, I can't get my pacing or my timing within CKLA. So, they have said, like, I've had to use a timer. And that's really a great tool, to help you get used to this pacing, because the timing within the lesson is different all the time. You could have a quick 10-minute warm up and then you have a 20-minute lesson. So it's always different. So I'll talk about that as I plan, as I teach, some things to keep an eye on for pacing and timing. The next thing we have here, formative assessments. As you can see on the lesson overview there, where our primary focus objectives are listed, right underneath there, you see your formative assessments. These are listed here for every lesson. Could be a variety of things. Here you see an example of an exit pass, but it could be an activity book page, an observation. Lots of varieties here, but it's really great that these formative assessments are always going to align to those primary focus objectives. Next thing here, universal access and sidebar supports. I will point these out as I'm doing my plan aloud, but these are really great resources that are already built in to help you support all learners in your classroom. The universal access section is found right after this lesson at a glance document under the advanced preparation. And it's so funny when I'm working with teachers, they're always like, where did you find that? I'm like, probably the part I would have skipped under that advanced preparation thing. Those are just, it's this little section that says universal access, but it does give you little hints that may help 1, 2, maybe all of the students in your classroom. And then the sidebar supports, you'll see me point those out today as well as I do my plan aloud, but they are just in that, the sides of your teacher guides, usually in that gray section, and they really are already built in there to kind of give you a hint to reach those learners in your room. Sometimes they're going to give you some extra scaffolding. Sometimes they'll even provide a challenge for students that are ready for that. So these are things that are already built in to CKLA. But if you look at that last bullet point there, it says your decision making, right? I love CKLA. I love our curriculum. but you know your students best, right? So it's you that makes all of this work. So it's your decision making is really going to make your students shine here. It's always important to remember you can follow the curriculum and make good, important decisions for your students. So let's go over some pacing suggestions before I dive into the plan aloud first. So the first one there is just to really acknowledge your steep learning curve. If this is your first year of implementation, maybe even second year, it's just good to just take a breath and acknowledge, okay, this is a learning curve for myself, right? Learning a new curriculum, but also for my students. It could be a completely different way of teaching. So just keeping that at the forefront of your mind while you are making those decisions in your teaching, thinking, okay, you know what? We're not going to be able to do every single question. And that's okay. So just acknowledging that. The next one, those primary focus objectives, again, they are your guiding beacons. Those are the ones that you just need to keep. This is my goal. This is what I'm going to hit today. And that be your main focus. The next one, be brief with vocabulary review. We included this because this comes up a lot. You know, teachers will just say, I am struggling with my pacing. I can't get that whole lesson done. And we kind of talk about what we do within that lesson. A lot of times we're spending way too much time on the vocabulary. Okay. You're going to watch me go through a vocabulary preview today. And just notice a lot of times I hear is, I can't believe how quick that is. That's because the way it is implemented within the curriculum, it's always going to cycle throughout the unit. So we don't need to worry teaching that vocab word to mastery in that specific segment of the lesson. It's going to keep coming around throughout that unit. The next part, it says decide which discussion questions to emphasize. And if you see on the screen, you see an example from some discussion questions. So if you see here, there are 5 listed. You may not be able to get to 5. So in your planning, go through and decide which ones I have to ask and discuss. Again, referencing that primary focus objective. You know, so if your primary focus objective is something about setting, something about theme, then you're going to make sure you ask those questions. Think quality over quantity, which kind of leads into that last suggestion there, which is it's better to do some of each lesson component. A lot of times, especially in the knowledge strand, we'll hear, I didn't have time to get the application activity. I was trying to, you know, really do well with that read aloud. So that's where we need to really think about. My goal is to do some of each lesson component. And that's where making these teacher decisions, like, you know what, I don't have time to ask all of these questions because I want to make sure we get to that application activity. Or in the skill strand, when you're practicing a skill and they give you that chart of, you know, X amount of words to practice or phrases, feel free to limit those. I'm going to start out by doing 5 out of 10 of these so I can get to every part of my lesson. That will really help with your pacing. And you'll see me kind of make these decisions as I do my plan aloud. So looking at our agenda, we're going to move now into that plan aloud. I'm going to do a full plan aloud kind of with the knowledge strand, and then I'll teach a little bit of that lesson. So I'm going to be modeling a grade 1, domain 4, lesson 7, Amon-Ra and the Gods of Ancient Egypt. It's a knowledge strand lesson. You're going to see me do a think aloud, looking at the introducing the read aloud, and then the application activity. So let's go ahead and get started here. So this is my lesson overview, right? You see on the screen here my primary focus objectives and my formative assessments. So I went through and I read those, and the big takeaway here is what I'm seeing as the religious practice and beliefs. Now, honestly, if I was doing this work, I'd be highlighting or writing sticky notes, all of those things on my actual teacher guide. Everyone has a different preference, but I just kind of included these as a reference for you. So that's what I just kind of remember. Right? Religious practice and beliefs. That's the big takeaway here that we're focusing on. So here is that next page, right? So we have a note to the teacher. It says you will not use the civilization chart in students' activity pages 1.1 and 5.1 again until lesson 10. So to be sure to collect those activity pages, because we know first graders will lose them or crinkle them up or something will happen. So I put a big star there. When we're done with this lesson, we're going to collect those. As you see here, there's that universal access, giving some tips here. Should I maybe find some other pictures and images of Amon-Ra and other Egyptian gods, just to provide that background for our students? And then if you see here, here are the 3 vocabulary words that we're going to preview in this lesson. So I put here vocab: brief, show word, give definition, and post on wall. So in my room, in my head, I have a domain vocabulary word. You can choose to write that word in front of your students. You can choose to have that word pre-written, whatever works for you. But just to kind of, these are the 3 words we're going to focus on here. So now we're getting into introducing that read aloud, right? So I love here how the primary focus objective is listed again. Noting here that this introduction should take about 10 minutes. Over here on the side, you're noticing it's letting you know you're going to need some image cards. So it starts out with just a where are we? We're going to look at where Egypt is. I know that my students love when I go to Google Earth and I type in Egypt and we kind of zoom in and then we zoom out. So that's what I would do for my students. And then it's kind of go through the process here of just kind of what we'll be doing for that introduction. I wanted to highlight over here just some transitioning things to help students. So we're going to access that, knowledge from a previous story and by looking at these image cards. That's what students are going to do, and we're going to discuss that. And I love some of the sentences here. It's kind of giving out some clue words here, like Nile River, flooding. So I put a star around that. So as I'm teaching, I remember to kind of touch upon those. And then we are going to then, after we go through that, we're going to ask the students for our check for understanding what polytheistic means. Our first graders, that's what we're going to ask them. So I'm going to say, you know what? Might have to add some support here. And then I know that we are working on a chart, this chart in this unit. So maybe we'll go back and reference the chart if they need some support with that. And then the story we're reading about today is, if you see here, her name is Marit. And I went back to the read alouds that are available on the website and listened to the story because I wanted to make sure I was pronouncing it correctly. To be quite honest, I have no idea if this is the exact way to write that phonetically, but this is how my brain is going to see it in the moment. So these are all personal notes. Marit, that's the way I'm like, okay, that makes sense to me. That will help me remember in the moment on how to pronounce that name. So let's get into the read aloud. I wanted to highlight again here that your primary focus objectives are listed. This purpose for listening, a lot of times teachers forget to give this to students. So I wanted to put a star here so I remember to say that. And then as you see here, I didn't really add too many extra notes here because the curriculum guide does a really good job. The teacher guide does a really good job of already doing that for you. And then here's my next page. Keep going, we're reading. I wanted to really circle and highlight the support question here because in the story, it kind of shifts. So I wanted to really point that out to students. Then for the check for understanding, using evidence, it says who is telling the story and how do you know? Oh, I apologize. I did not mean to click yet. I would think, students will be ready to do some talking now. And I think it's a good opportunity here to have them turn and talk. So just an engagement strategy that I'm adding in. So I would continue doing this process, right? Going through each, adding little things like this, highlighting, starring, looking at those sidebar supports. These are those sidebar supports I mentioned earlier. I didn't do all of it, the whole read aloud. I was skipped right on to comprehension questions just for sake of time today. So here are the comprehension questions that you would ask after the story. So for the check for understanding, there's a question here. It says, describe the gods and goddesses of ancient Egypt. So I know the word depicted is used in that story. It's one of the vocabulary words. So I put a little note here just to maybe say they were depicted as, and then I put a little note here that it might be a good opportunity to maybe refer back to the images that were in that story. Maybe I'll need it, maybe I won't, but I like that. So looking at our questions, number one's a literal question. I feel like this is something that I can ask quickly, maybe just I think aloud myself, depending on time. Number two, I want to get to that. Number three, I put a question mark here. Depending on time, I don't know if I'm going to get to it, but I definitely want to get to number 1, 2, and 4. Again, thinking of those primary focus objectives, religious practices and beliefs, that's of course what their exit pass is. So I really want to set them up for success. So having that knowledge of what that primary focus is, what the formative assessment is, I want to set them up for success in my lesson delivery. After the comprehension questions, you move into one of my favorite parts of the lesson, which is the word work. It is a quick 5-minute lesson. They're all pretty similar. There's little tweaks on each one. And this is the word depicted again. So they're asked here, how have you depicted your favorite places? And I just put a little note here, like maybe talk about art class, what are one of their recent projects, or, just to kind of really help, give a little extra support there. Then we move on to that application activity here. Again, you can see the primary focus objectives are different, right? It's a writing and a language. That's why the application activities are so important, because this is the opportunity where students really get to put out what they've taken in this whole time. So in our application activity, they're working on that civilization chart. I said, I'm going to provide a model. There's a big chart in our classroom. I'm going to write on that big chart, provide that support for them. And then I circled this support over here. Students may have to use appropriate images from an activity page to really help them with this activity. So just kind of wanted to highlight here all of those things. So that was a very brief example of what a plan aloud would look like. So I'm going to go through and jump into the lesson. I will act as the teacher and as if you are students. You may hear me kind of break out of that and give like a little tip in there as well. Like I said, feel free to be students, but feel free just to sit back and watch as well. All right, friends. So we are going to get started with our story today, Amon-Ra and the Gods of Ancient Egypt. So we're going to review different features of this ancient Egypt civilization. So we're going to first start out just by knowing where are we. So I know we love to do this. We're going to get on Google Earth and we're going to zoom in and we're going to find Egypt. So this is when I would actually do this physical process with the students. And then when I zoom back out, I would say, all right, who can now locate Egypt? Yep, Samantha, come on. Oh, great job, Samantha. Yes, there is Egypt right there. And as you can see, Egypt is a part of Africa. Yeah, so here's Egypt, and then here we are all the way over here. Yes, great job. All right, so before we get started, we're going to talk about what we have already learned. And I have you here in your groups, right? So I've got our group 1, our group 2, and group 3. Yes, fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to give each of you a card. And when I give you that card, I want you to kind of join together I'm gonna give you a few minutes and I want you to talk about the card that I have given you and think about what you have learned about ancient Egypt civilization, and then we'll share out all together. So group 1, here is your card. Group 2, here is your card. And group 3, here is your card. Okay, so go ahead, come together. Fantastic. I already hear great things. So of course I wouldn't display all 3 images, but I just kind of did that for you all to see which cards the students are receiving. So give them some time to talk, maybe offer some suggestions to look at the civilization chart that's already up in the room. You know, provide those supports as I'm walking around. Ooh, I hear you talking about flooding. Why could flooding be good? Yes, great. Do you remember the name of that river? Yes, the Nile River. Wow, good job. So give them some minutes, few time, and then bring everyone back. All right, friends, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good job. Thank you. I'm going to collect those cards. Let's start with group 1 and go through everything. And then I heard some really great things about some flooding in the Nile River. Can anyone, help with that? Why could that be good? Group 1, do you want to tell them what we talked about? Go ahead. Yes. So that flooding that happens in the Nile River gets the land ready for what? Do you remember? Right, farming. So yes, the Nile River flooding gets the land ready for farming. Can you say that complete sentence? Group 1, let's hear all of you say it. Fantastic work, everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and take your cards up. Thank you. Last thing I'll ask you before we go ahead and get reading. What do you remember about religion in Mesopotamia? Again, you can take a look at the chart. Why don't you do a quick turn and talk with your partner? I'm hearing some good things. Did they have just one God? Oh, good job. All right, friends, come on back. So what did we remember about the religion of Mesopotamia? Yes, they had many gods. They believed in many gods and goddesses. Fantastic. Do you remember what that's called? It's a real fancy word. Polytheistic. Can you all say that? Polytheistic. Yes, very good job. The religion of Mesopotamia was polytheistic. Fantastic. All right, friends, so take a look at this image that you see on the screen here. This was from the story that we read yesterday, the read aloud from yesterday. Remember it? Yes, good. Okay, so remember that we have learned about Marit and her family in ancient Egypt, right? Can you all point out to Marit? And yes, yeah, Johnny, can you come on up? Fantastic. Point out Marit for us. Thank you. Great job. Yes. So today we're going to continue with that story of Marit and her mother in ancient Egypt, and we're going to learn about their religion or their belief system. Yeah, are you excited? Fantastic. Okay, so we do have a quick few words that I want to preview before we go ahead and read. So this word is the word blossom. Can you all say blossom? Blossom? Great. Okay, and it's just a flower on a plant or a tree. Super easy, right? We don't see many blossoms right now in here because it's winter, right? But that's what that is. We'll be seeing them soon when spring comes. Fantastic. Next word, depicted. Say that. Depicted. Great job. It's like shown in pictures or described. Yes, I heard you. You said, I hear the word pick in there. Good job. And then one more, lotus. Lotus, good job. It's just a plant with pink flowers that grows on the surface of water. Awesome. You all are amazing. All right, friends. So as you are listening today, I want you to find out what the ancient Egyptian gods looked like and what kind of things they did. So if you see here, the image I'm showing you, you see different types of gods. Can someone describe what they see? Go ahead. Wow, yes, great job. Okay, listening ears on, eyes on the screen. The old stories from Egypt said that some of the gods and goddesses looked like specific animals the Egyptians saw around them in their own country, or a mixture of animals and human beings. For example, one common Egyptian bird was a small hawk called a falcon. The ancient Egyptians believed in a god named Horus, who was depicted or shown in pictures or described in words as a man's body topped with the head of a falcon. Yes, yes. Another of their gods, Sobek, was depicted with a human body with the head of a crocodile. The head of a crocodile. There have always been real crocodiles living along the banks of the Nile River, and they are always hungry. They often try to catch and eat other animals. In the old days, people believed in Sobek. See Sobek up there? Great. The god with the crocodile's head, so they could pray to him to keep real crocodiles away. The Egyptians were careful to say nice things about him. See, they would say, we made handsome statue of you, great Sobek, and we will leave meat and fish in the front of the statue for you to eat. The ancient Egyptians' most important god had different names or different parts of Egypt. Some people called him Ammon. Some people called him Ra. Sometimes they put those together as Ammon-Ra. These were all names for the Egyptian god of the sun, who they said created everything, including many of the other gods and goddesses. Friends, you just heard some real ideas about the ancient Egyptians and their beliefs. Let's listen as Marit's mother tells her a story about Ammon-Ra, the Egyptian god of the sun, and when the ancient Egyptians believed about the creation of the world. And this is where I would point out that the read aloud is kind of shifting. It's going to be now about Marit and her mother in that story. I would kind of point that out to listeners. All right, so I do not have time to go through the rest of the kind of teaching there, the rest of the lesson, but I do want to just show you again what that would look like very quickly. And I just want to make sure, can you all see the teacher guide? Just someone say no if we can't see the teacher guide. Fantastic. I'm a Google Meet girl, so when I jump on Zoom, it's always a little bit of a learning curve for me. So like I said, call me out. So after the story, we go through those questions. I go through my planning process, asking the ones that I know I need to hit. There's that word work. And then there is that application activity. And I did put in my notes somewhere that maybe setting a timer for 40 minutes. So after 40 minutes goes off, I know that it's time. Hey, I need to wrap things up so I can get to this application activity, to allow 20 minutes for that application activity, or a little buffer there in between. So that is the whole process there. I'm going to give everyone just a minute to kind of pause and reflect on this knowledge strand before we kind of do a quick little overview of the skill strand. So I just want you to think about, after you watch me kind of plan aloud and present some of it, did anything surprise you? Did this reaffirm any part of your practice? Anything you're already doing, like, oh yeah, this is awesome. And then any questions you may have, you are welcome to ask now or maybe save to the end. We'll take about a minute here.
Lucy, is it okay if I chime in at this point?
Absolutely, yes.
So I want to take a moment just to link the Science of Teaching and Reading. And in Texas, we're going through the Texas Reading Academy. which guides us in this place. So coming from that lens, what I saw a lot of was a lot of building oral language. So the words repeated themselves so that students can hear those words. And we also had visuals to support the learning of those words. So even if they weren't a vocabulary word, the kids are hearing that. So when they hear Egypt again, or they hear gods again, or ancient again, that they're going to have that basis. I also noticed that when you did the vocabulary words, you said to be really brief because they're also going to go in that spiraling cycle. And I just wanted to encourage people to remember that our kids, especially the last 2 years, but even just due to our teaching practices, they're missing that phonemic foundation. So hearing the sounds or separating sounds is something that they're not, their foundation is not strong enough in. So as we fill in that gap, if there's a word like bloom, that before you actually put the printed word up, that you can say the word bloom and then just say boo, takes 1 second, but they heard that you can separate the word into those phonemes and then push the posted, the printed word. It doesn't help if we do it at the same time. So you got to do the phonemic piece before you put the printed word up. So what I love about CKLA is that it is a systematic instruction. So those of you who are not using CKLA, what that means is we're building from year to year to year, and that content is going to continue to build. So they're learning about ancient Egypt here. I know that there's another lesson in 3rd grade that builds on this lesson. So that's why it's important to touch every component in the lesson, right? So I definitely appreciate your just your presentation of it. I just want to throw that in there because Texas, we're going through this, this meaty, rigorous course, so that people can kind of make that connection.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for adding in. And, another thing as well, and these are all like part of that teacher decision making, when you are showing, it'll sometimes say like you can give visuals, you can add an extra visual for some of those words as well. So just kind of really, knowing your students and making those choices as well. Just so that we get to the skill strand, I am going to move on. And then we can address questions at the end. I just want to make sure I touch upon the skill strand. I don't have time to go through the plan aloud, unfortunately, for this, but I did just want to show, the process. So on the screen here, hopefully I did it correctly, and you can see the lesson overview. So if you look here, I'm just going to be doing the introducing the sound part of the lesson. So as you see, the different primary focus objectives along with those formative assessments. Here you have that lesson at a glance document with your grouping, your timing, materials. Again, when I model lessons in classrooms, I set timers for myself just to make sure like, okay, it's time to move on, getting to each of those components. Here again is that advanced preparation, that universal access. This is telling you can use a digital component that's already provided there for you, which is really, really nice, or you can make the chart. So this lesson starts with a spelling assessment. I'm not going to model that part of it, but I'm going to start right here with the foundational skills. So just to kind of highlight here, foundational skills, we're going to listen and distinguish the ah and ah sounds, which is really difficult. Then students will go on and read and write 1-syllable words with that sound spelling ah, and then they're going to be doing a wiggle card activity. So you're going to see me just do a couple of minutes because I want to save time for questions of this introducing the sound piece right here. And just to note, something that's so crucial about CKLA and the whole science of reading is that importance of phonemic awareness. So this introducing the sound part, really at this part, there are no visuals needed. We are really working on that oral process. So visually, this part is going to be quite boring for you all. You're going to be staring at this slide right here and really just kind of looking at me. I have this up here listed in case you already have the curriculum and wanted to kind of access this and see what I'm going through or see what part I'm doing. but it's grade 1, unit 3, lesson 15. So this is just the introducing the sound part, which again is just that phonemic and phonological awareness. So no visuals are needed for this part. All right, friends, so today we are learning a new sound, and it is ah, like in paw. Like a paw, like your dog's paw. Yeah, very good. Can you say that ah sound with me? Ah, ah, good. Let's stretch it out. Ah. Stretch it out again. Ah, ah, fantastic. Can you whisper that sound? Oh, good job. One time, can you use a monster voice for that sound? Oh, geez. Okay, great job. Very good. So I'm going to say some words. I want you to repeat them after me. And these words have that ah sound in the beginning. Okay, ready? Autumn, awful, awesome. Good job. Did you hear that ah sound in the beginning? Autumn, awful, awesome, fantastic. All right, now you're going to repeat some words after me that have that ah sound in the middle of the word. Hawk, yawn, dawn, fawn. Good job. Ah, k. Did you hear it in the middle? Y, ah, Good job. Fantastic. Now we're going to repeat some words that have it at the end. So you're listening to it at the end. Ready? Draw, straw, law, jaw. Fantastic. Okay, now think about that ah sound. Do you think it's a vowel sound or a consonant sound? Go ahead and turn and talk. Great job. I heard some really good things. Lisa, can you share what you were talking about, what you and your partner were talking about? Yes, you said, I heard you say it's a vowel sound made because your mouth is open and that air comes out. Ah, fantastic. So I just wanted to talk briefly about this. I'm not going to be able to do this whole next part of this activity, but this, and I'm going to show the teacher guide for this so you can kind of reference it. But the next part of this, which is really, really important, is this minimal pairs activity where you're comparing that ah sound, spelled A-W, to the ah sound, right? With the O. So it really goes through talking very specifically at what it feels like to make that sound. You're going to have students partner up and look at each other when they're saying words like, and you see them here, caught and caught, draw, drop. So they can kind of see each other making it and kind of hear those sounds. So that's how you would introduce the sound. Again, no visuals needed because it's that phonemic and phonological awareness we're working on. Now, when you move into introducing the spelling, that's when you're going to add your visuals. And I always like to, not always, but I think it's a great time in between the introducing the sound and introducing the spelling to utilize the sound library that's available. So the sound library is on, if you see here, I'm just in skills unit 3 under materials, it says sound library. But I think these sounds are so hard. So this kind of just serves as a nice transition. So let's listen to that sound again.
Ah.
And then,
Ah.
sorry. And then you can play the little video. I'll just show you a little brief version of it.
Ah. Pa.
Ah, paw. Ah, paw.
That's my favorite feature, is the way it zooms in on a student's mouth and you can really see. And also sometimes just for you to do a quick check on yourself, like, am I doing this right? I haven't thought about how to say this, so I love that feature. And I always just say, when in doubt, use the sound library. So unfortunately, I just want to be able to save time, but I'm gonna give you a minute just to kind of think about that, introducing the sound part. What did you notice? What questions do you have? And then, how can you improve it for your students? And that whole thing I was doing, that is just something I would assume that I'd always do with my students. Like, I say it, you say it. So at that point, we're in unit 3 here. You have those routines down and students know what to expect when you're doing those things. So I give you a minute to just kind of reflect on all of that.
I do see one, and it was just a
Thank
direct
you.
message to me. So I'm sorry, Andrew, it was just to me. Where is the sound library? Where would they locate it? That was the question.
Sure. So I am on my skills 3 because this is the unit that I'm teaching. So here are all of my resources. One way to access it is it'll just say sound library under that unit. When I click on that, it's going to bring me to all of the sounds that I'm teaching in this unit 3. However, there is a student hub where students have access to it. You also have access to the hub. So you could click on it through the hub. And I apologize, I got to get back to the current grade level there. And then you'll see here under sounds, and you could play it this way, clicking on your unit, but it would, either way, you could access it through your CKLA teacher resource site. And then under your skills unit, daily instruction tab, you would click on skills and then skills 3, and you'll see sound library there. And then of course, the little robot is always asking you to join him on the hub there. Thank you for letting me know about that question.
Yeah, and then also if we have people on the call who are not using CKLA, first of all, get to it fast. But second of all, there are things like the sound library out there, produced by speech pathologists, produced by dyslexia specialists, all over the internet. Companies that want us to learn as educators to reflect on our practice and make sure we're pronouncing everything correctly. So if you're not on CKLA yet, there are similar supports. You can just Google, how do I say, and then put the letters in there. And like I said, great, phenomenal research groups that have the same kind of support.
Yes, thank you. And I know we're getting close to time. So I did just want to put this last slide on there for anyone who has to jump off and get to another one. But, any information, if you are a current user, there's an email there for you, edsupport@amplify.com, or then there's another information for you if you're a user looking for more information, or new user, sorry. But I just wanted to thank you all for your time today. I am going to hang out. If you have some questions, I'll be happy to kind of answer them for you in the chat box, or if you want to jump off chat and talk to me, I'd love that as well. But I understand there's lots of great things happening today. So I wanted to give everyone a few minutes to get a breather, get some more coffee, and get to your next session. But if you have time and have questions, I'll be happy to help. But if not, thank you so much for joining, and hope to see you again.
I did get another personal message. I think
Sure.
it's just because I work with a lot of people in our
Yes.
district right now for the Literacy Academy. So they're wondering if they don't have that feature, is it different? Are the resources that we're getting in Texas, or is CKLA as a whole the same resources across the board?
Andrew, do you happen to know specifically about some things with the sound library not available to certain customers?
I'm not familiar with that, Lucy.
Okay. I'm not sure if it's, I don't know who asked the question, if they are in like a pilot, then they may not have it. I'm not sure what's specifically going on in Texas this year. I do apologize. But if you have CKLA second edition, then you should have access to the sound library for sure.
And maybe you can just put your email in the chat box.
Yes.
And that way, whoever that is can kind of give you a little bit more information via email, and we can solve that. I also know that Amplify, there's so many people who can answer that question, right? So if you're on a campus that is implementing that, go to your campus leader or go to your district leader, and they probably can answer that better than I can even, right?
Yes. And then, yeah, email me, and if I can forward it along to someone who will know what's going on, why you may not have it. That's a fantastic.
Yeah, and I put my email in there as well. And
Thank you.
Like Lucy said, we'll find the right person to connect you with to get you the answer.
Well, before I hop off, because I'm going to go to the next session, Lucy and Andrew are going to stay on the call, so you can continue to stay here and ask questions. But I do want to take the opportunity just to say thank you both for dedicating your time, not only today, but just to supporting us as we implement CKLA. So have a wonderful afternoon and morning. And those of you on the call, please stay on and come off of mute and ask your questions because they really are here to just help us move forward. So thank you so much, and everyone have an awesome day.
Thanks, Amanda, for having us. Have a good day.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
Can you, so we are going to be piloting CKLA next year. And one of the questions that we are just playing around with in our mind is, how does that look when you're reading the reader? I know sometimes it's whole group, sometimes it tells you to split into small groups. Are there specific reasons why it suggests one over the other on some days? And I'm just curious about your vision and how that, thinking about how that would work best.
So it is very intentional. Like, that is one thing I even am still finding the deeper I dive into it's just, everything is placed very specifically for reason. So it may have you do a whole group reading in lesson 4, but then do partner in lesson 7 because they're reinforcing something. However, if this is your first year or a pilot, your students may not be ready for that partner reading, or your small group may be your whole group. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we say. So when you look at those decisions that are laid out there for you, I think it's really good to put your teacher hat on and say, we're not ready for this partner reading, or maybe 2 kids are, but the other 18 of us are going to. In saying that, it's important to always allow students to have some practice in reading, right? So if the text that you're working on there, let's do it, but then let's also give them some practice. Maybe it's just a more heavily scaffolded.
Okay.
Does that make sense? I know I didn't really answer it, but.
No, that's what I was thinking in my head, that it might depend on your class, how you choose to do it. And sometimes we might do it, we might read it a whole group with more heavier scaffolds than sending kids off into partners.
Right.
Or that we might read in small groups. I don't know, just really trying to get a vision for how that looks.
Yes. And you're right. There are different times when they call for different things, but you may just have to make especially during the pilot, like, okay, I'm going to have to provide some extra scaffolds here.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.